trying to keep up with everything going on in crypto as like a full-time job these days.
Yeah.
Especially when you're talking about something as volatile and dynamic as XRP.
Right.
And, you know, I feel like every day there's just this flood of news and predictions and analyses just hitting us from all sides.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, you know, thankfully you sent us a bunch of really interesting stuff about XRP, and that's exactly what we're going to dive into today.
Yeah.
We're going to try to cut through all the noise, you know, kind of like distill it down and figure out what are the really important things that have been happening with XRP lately.
Absolutely.
You provided us with, you know, a really comprehensive set of materials, you know, everything from like breaking news to really like in-depth technical forecasts. And what we're going to do is we're not just going to like report on these sources like, you know, like a news show or something.
Right.
We're going to try to like really understand what they're telling us about, you know, the current state of XRP. Like, you know, what are the important events? What are people saying?
Yeah.
And what might happen next?
Absolutely.
You know, and we're going to do all this without getting too bogged down in like the technical jargon.
Exactly.
So, one of the first things that really caught my eye when I was looking through all this stuff was this buzz around Wall Street bulls advising people to basically load up on XRP within the next 60 days.
Right.
And this was just on Twitter yesterday.
Yeah.
And I don't know about you, but to me, when somebody gives you like a specific time frame like that, it makes me think that they're expecting something big to happen.
Yeah, it's really intriguing. Putting out a call like that with such a clear deadline, you know, 60 days accumulate.
60 days.
It definitely suggests that, you know, they're anticipating some kind of event that's going to move the market.
Yeah.
Whether that's some kind of regulatory news or, you know, a major company announcing that they're adopting XRP.
Yep.
Or maybe even some kind of technical development, you know, that they're seeing that we're not.
Yeah, that they're predicting.
Exactly.
Yeah. And what's really wild to me is how quickly the market reacted to that tweet.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
It's just like lightning fast. I was looking at the numbers, and when that tweet went out, XRP was trading at like 78 cents.
Okay.
And within an hour, the price had already jumped up by 3%.
Wow.
But even more interesting than that, I think, is the trading volume. Like, it just went through the roof.
Yeah.
There was a 25% increase in trading volume just from that one tweet.
Crazy.
Bringing the total volume up to 1.2 billion XRP.
It's a lot of activity.
It's a lot of activity for one little tweet.
Yeah. You know what that tells me is that Wall Street bulls, like that call, really resonated with a lot of people.
Yeah.
Enough people that they were like, all right, time to jump in.
Yeah, like let's get on this.
Right. You know, and it wasn't just the price and volume that were affected.
Right.
Like the whole market sentiment seemed to shift in a positive direction.
Yeah.
You know, the crypto fear and greed index.
Right.
Which basically tells us, like, are people feeling scared or are they feeling greedy?
Yeah, are they feeling bullish or bearish?
Exactly. And that index actually went up pretty noticeably from 52 to 58.
Okay.
So that's a good sign. And on top of that, we saw a 15% increase in active addresses.
Oh.
So that means more people were actually like using XRP, you know, making transactions.
Yeah, actually doing stuff with it.
Exactly. It shows that people were getting engaged.
That's a great point. It wasn't just about people buying and selling. It was people actually using it.
Right. Using it for its intended purpose.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
Yeah. And, you know, it wasn't just the main XRP trading pair that was affected either.
Right.
I saw some data that showed increased volume for XRP against both Bitcoin and Ethereum.
Yeah, I saw that too, and I thought that was really interesting because it's not just about XRP going up in value. It's about it outperforming some of the bigger players.
Exactly.
Like Bitcoin and Ethereum.
It's like people were looking at the whole market and saying, okay, maybe it's time to shift some of my holdings into XRP.
Yeah.
It indicates a broader, you know, recognition of XRP's potential.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, you know, from a more technical perspective, there were also some pretty interesting signals.
Oh, yeah.
Like the RSI, the Relative Strength Index, was getting close to what we call overbought territory.
Okay.
Which basically means there's been a lot of buying pressure and the momentum is really strong.
Okay.
And then we also saw a bullish MACD crossover.
Okay.
Which is, you know, it's a technical indicator that a lot of traders use, and they often interpret that as a signal to buy.
Gotcha.
So that's another positive sign. And on top of that, the price of XRP had moved above its 50-day moving average.
Right.
It was another bullish signal.
Okay.
And the Bollinger Bands were widening.
Okay.
Which usually means that we can expect to see some increased price volatility. Things could move up or down more quickly.
So it's like, buckle up, get ready for a ride.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Fasten your seatbelts. It's going to be interesting.
So it sounds like, from all of that short term, there was a pretty positive picture emerging for XRP.
Yeah, I'd say so.
And this wasn't all happening in isolation, was it?
Right.
The whole crypto market, the total market cap was also going up.
Yep.
And XRP seemed to be moving pretty much in sync with Bitcoin and Ethereum.
Exactly. There was a clear correlation there.
Yeah, it was moving with the big boys.
But here's where things get really interesting.
Okay.
Some of the analysis you shared talked about the connection between AI and the crypto market.
Right.
And apparently these AI-driven trading algorithms were picking up on all this volatility and positive sentiment around XRP.
Wow. So they're not just looking at charts, they're like reading the news and stuff?
Well, they're not exactly reading it like we do,
right.
but they're analyzing massive amounts of data, including social media posts like tweets, and they can detect shifts in sentiment.
Gotcha. So like they saw all this positive stuff about XRP and they were like, okay, it's time to buy.
Yeah, basically. And, it even had a ripple effect on some of the AI-related tokens like AGIX and FITT.
Right.
Their prices went up too.
That's so crazy. Like it's all connected.
It is. It really highlights how interconnected and reactive the market has become. Information spreads so quickly, and these AI systems can amplify market movements.
That's a little scary, but also really cool.
Yeah, it's definitely something to keep an eye on.
All right, so we talked about some of the short-term stuff, what's been happening over the past 24 hours.
Right.
But let's shift gears a bit and talk about some of the longer-term predictions.
Okay, sounds good.
So you included some analysis from Crypto.
Yep.
And they mentioned that there was actually a period of relatively quiet trading for XRP, right around $2.47.
Okay.
And this was before all that buzz from Wall Street bulls.
Right. So this was, despite all the excitement we saw earlier in the week around Trump's comments about a crypto strategic reserve.
Right.
And, the ongoing SEC lawsuit.
Yeah, all that stuff.
It seems like things had calmed down a bit.
Yeah, it felt like after those initial bursts of energy, things kind of settled down for a little bit.
Right.
But then we start to get into some really different price predictions for the future.
That's right.
And I'm talking about some wild swings here.
Yeah, for sure.
For instance, one analyst, blockchain backer, is predicting that XRP could go as high as $8 to $10.
Okay.
So what's he basing that on?
Well, the key to understanding his analysis is that he's really focused on looking for patterns on price charts.
Okay.
Especially the XRP BTC chart.
Gotcha.
And he thinks he's seeing some similarities to past market cycles.
Okay.
And he's also using something called the 4.236 Fibonacci extension.
Right.
Which is basically a tool that traders use to try and identify potential price targets in the future.
Okay.
And it's based on these mathematical ratios that are found in nature.
Right. The Fibonacci sequence.
Exactly.
Yeah, I've heard of that.
So he's less concerned with the day-to-day news and more about identifying these historical price patterns and then projecting them forward using these Fibonacci levels.
Okay, so it's not so much about what's happening right now, it's about what happened in the past.
Right. It's about looking for those repeating patterns.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And, he's also saying that if Bitcoin were to hit his predicted peak of $127,000,
wow,
that could push XRP up to around $10.40.
So it's kind of dependent on Bitcoin going up, too.
Right. It's a conditional prediction.
Yeah.
But he also mentions a slightly more conservative target of $8.68.
Okay.
If you're just looking at XRP's own historical chart patterns.
So if Bitcoin doesn't quite make it to 127,000.
Right. Then XRP might not hit that $10 mark.
Gotcha.
But it could still see a significant increase based on its own past performance.
Okay, so there's two different scenarios there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's important to remember, past performance is never a guarantee of future results.
Of course, of course.
He's essentially saying, hey, we've seen this before.
Right.
And here's where it led. But that doesn't mean it'll happen exactly the same way this time.
Yeah, that's a good point.
But it gives us something to think about.
Okay, so blockchain backer is saying $8 to $10.
Yeah, potentially.
But then we have another analyst mentioned in the Crypto piece, Dark Defender.
Right.
Who has an even more eye-popping prediction.
Yeah, his prediction is definitely more out there.
He's saying XRP could surge to $77.77 during this bull run.
That's quite a jump.
That is a huge jump.
Yeah, I mean, if that were to happen, it would be a game changer.
Yeah, that would be wild.
So What's he basing this on?
Yeah, what's his logic?
Well, he's using a combination of exponential Fibonacci levels and Elliott wave theory.
Uh-huh.
And Elliott wave theory is a pretty complex framework.
I've heard of it, but I don't really understand it.
Yeah, it's not the easiest thing to grasp. But basically, it tries to understand market psychology by looking for these recurring wave patterns in price movements.
Okay.
And Dark Defender is saying that based on his analysis, XRP needs to stay above this key level of $2.39 and 51 thousandths.
$2.39 and 51 thousandths.
Yep, that's the median level he's watching.
Okay.
And as long as it stays above that, he's pretty bullish.
Okay.
And he's laid out this roadmap for how he thinks the price could move.
Okay.
First, he sees it going to the $5 to $8 range.
Okay.
Then 18 to 23.
Okay.
And then eventually into triple digits.
Triple digits. Whoa.
Yeah, it's a pretty bold prediction.
That's crazy. So we have blockchain backers saying 8 to 10.
Yep.
And Dark Defender saying almost 80.
Yeah, it's a pretty wide range.
Yeah, it just shows you how, like, nobody really knows what's going to happen.
Right.
But it's fun to speculate.
Absolutely.
The Xi Crypto article mentioned that when all this analysis was being done, XRP was trading at around $2.44. Okay.
So just to give us some context.
Right. Yeah.
But it's interesting to see how like these different analysts are using different approaches.
Yeah, they're all looking at the same data, but they're interpreting it in different ways.
Yeah, and coming up with some pretty wild predictions.
That's what makes the market so exciting.
Yeah.
You never know what's going to happen.
And speaking of Dark Defender,
Yeah.
you know the guy who's predicting $77? You also included a report from Bitcoinist.com
Right.
where he actually doubled down on his bullish outlook.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he said that XRP looks excellent.
Wow. So he's really confident.
Yeah, he seems pretty convinced.
Okay.
And he said that it's on a clear path towards multiple upside targets.
Interesting.
But he did acknowledge that there might be some resistance around $2.55
Okay.
in the short term.
Yeah.
And he said that the more immediate goal is $2.75.
Okay.
But he also identified a support level around $2.42.
So basically saying that even if there are some bumps along the way, XRP is still headed in the right direction long term.
And what about his long-term targets?
Yeah, so he stuck with his long-term prediction of 585, which would be a new all-time high for XRP.
Right.
And then he also mentioned that $77 target again, based on his exponential Fibonacci and Elliott wave analysis.
So he's still sticking to his guns on that one.
Yeah, he seems pretty confident.
Yeah.
And he emphasized that, you know, based on his model, exceeding $10 is definitely possible.
Interesting.
And he also reiterated the importance of holding above that 239.51 level.
Right, the median level.
Yeah, and he said that he anticipates a potential run to $8 first.
Okay.
Which he sees as like a stepping stone to that $18 to $23 range.
So he's got a whole roadmap laid out.
He does. He's got a whole plan.
That's cool.
Yeah. And just for reference, the Bitcoinist article also had XRP's price around $242. So it seems like all these reports are pretty consistent in terms of where the price was at that time.
Yeah, it's good to see that consistency.
Yeah, it gives us a little more confidence.
Right.
Okay, so we've heard from a couple of analysts who are pretty bullish on XRP.
Yep.
But you also included some analysis from FX Street.
Right.
That offered a slightly different perspective.
Oh, okay. How so?
Well, they mentioned that XRP was trading around 244 after finding support near its 100-day exponential moving average.
The 100-day EMA.
Right.
Gotcha.
But they also cautioned that there could be some volatility in the market.
Okay.
And they said that XRP, along with Bitcoin and Ethereum, could experience some increased price swings.
Yeah, volatility is always a risk in crypto.
Right.
So what were they attributing this potential volatility to?
So they were saying that it could be due to a couple of things.
Okay.
One is Trump's upcoming Liberation Day announcement on April 2nd.
Right.
And the other is some anticipated tariff news.
So some external factors that could shake things up.
Exactly. They were basically saying that sometimes these political and economic events can really inject some uncertainty into the crypto market.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So even though things were looking pretty good technically, they were also saying, hey, be careful because things could change quickly.
Yeah, it's a good reminder to not get too complacent.
Right.
So what did their technical analysis say?
Well, they said that if that 100-day EMA around 232 holds as support,
Okay.
Then we could see XRP move back up to retest that 272 resistance level.
Okay, so a potential upward move.
Right.
And what about the other indicator?
They said that the RSI was neutral at that point, that there was a bullish Massey D crossover.
Right, which we talked about earlier.
Yeah, that can be a positive sign for traders.
Okay, so overall, a fairly optimistic outlook.
Yeah, but they also presented a bearish scenario.
Okay.
They said that if XRP fails to hold that support level around the 100-day EMA, then it could drop down towards the 196 support level.
Gotcha. So they were acknowledging both the potential upside and the potential downside.
Exactly. They were trying to present a balanced view.
That's responsible.
Yeah.
Not getting too carried away with either the bullish or the bearish sentiment.
Right, because ultimately nobody knows for sure.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've talked about Wall Street bulls. We've talked about Xi Crypto.
Yep.
We've talked about Bitcoinist.com. And we've talked about FX Street.
Right.
You also included some market data from Forbes, which showed XRP at $2.45.
Okay.
Up 1.65% on the day.
So a slight increase.
Yeah, nothing too crazy.
Right.
But I thought it was good that the Forbes piece included a little explanation of what Ripple and XRP are.
Yeah, it's always helpful to have that background information.
Right, because, not everyone listening might be super familiar with all the details. So they basically described it as a platform that's designed to facilitate global transactions with lower fees compared to Bitcoin.
So it's focused on efficiency and cost effectiveness.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's a big selling point for a lot of people.
Right, and they also included some historical price information.
Okay.
Like the highs and lows over different time frames.
Gotcha, so people can see how volatile XRP has been in the past.
Right, like how much it's gone up and down over the past week, the past month, the past year, even the past 5 years.
Yeah, that gives you a good sense of the potential risks and rewards.
And they also listed the average prices across a bunch of different cryptocurrency exchanges.
Right.
So you can see kind of where the market is valuing XRP at that moment.
Yeah, good to have that overview.
And then they also just briefly mentioned some of the related news we've already discussed.
Like the SEC lawsuit and Trump's comments.
Yeah, exactly. So it was like a nice little summary of everything.
Yeah, it tied everything together.
Okay, so Forbes gave us a bit of a snapshot of the market. But then we have UDOT today, who also offered their analysis.
Okay.
And they pointed to signs of a potential bullish reversal for XRP.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. They said that after it climbed above its 50-day EA, and it was trading around 243, it looked like it was setting its sights on that 270 resistance level.
Okay, so they were seeing some positive momentum?
Yeah, and they highlighted the fact that XRP had been making these higher lows since the beginning of March.
Which is usually a good sign.
Right. It suggests that the buyers are in control.
Yeah.
And they also said that there was slightly higher trading activity compared to the average over the previous 20 days.
Okay, so more people were getting involved.
Yeah, exactly.
So what did they say would confirm this bullish reversal?
They said that if XRP breaks above that descending trend line around 270, that would be a strong indication that the bulls are really in charge.
Gotcha.
But they also cautioned that if it falls back below the 50-day EMA, then the selling pressure could return.
So it's not a done deal yet.
Right. It could go either way.
Right.
But interestingly, UDOT today also had a breaking news item about Ripple.
Oh, what was that about?
They said that Ripple was securing more major wins.
Wow.
As it was wrapping up its battle with the SEC.
So it sounds like things are looking good for Ripple on that front.
Yeah, it seems like they're coming out on top.
That's a big deal.
It is a big deal.
Getting those legal issues resolved could be a major catalyst for XRP.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so UDOT today was talking about bullish reversals and SEC wins. But then we have some really juicy rumors.
Oh, yeah.
That were circulating on Binance Square.
Right.
About a potential $1.4 trillion deal involving XRP.
1.4 trillion? That's an insane amount of money.
It's almost unfathomable.
Yeah. I can't even wrap my head around it.
Yeah, it's a truly massive number.
Yeah.
And the speculation was that this deal would involve major financial institutions.
Wow.
And even governments.
So like the big players.
The biggest players.
Yeah.
Which, really highlights Ripple's position in the world of cross-border payments.
Right. They're already a major player in that space.
Exactly. And a deal of this magnitude would just solidify that position.
Yeah, it would be huge.
And you know what else is interesting?
What's that?
This reported shift in former President Trump's stance towards blockchain technology and digital assets.
Right. He used to be pretty skeptical.
He was definitely not a fan.
Yeah.
But now it seems like he's come around.
Yeah, it's like he's had a change of heart.
Right.
So I guess the question is, what impact could all this have on XRP?
Well, if this deal were to actually happen,
Right.
and if Trump were to create a more favorable regulatory environment,
Yeah.
it could have a huge impact on XRP's price and its demand.
Right.
And it could also ease some of the regulatory pressures that Ripple has been facing.
So it's like a lot of potential upside.
Yeah, it's a very interesting situation to watch.
Okay. So we have this potential mega deal.
And we have Trump potentially becoming more crypto-friendly.
Right.
But we also have the SEC situation,
Right.
which thankfully seems to be coming to an end.
Yeah.
FX Street reported that Ripple actually agreed to drop its cross-appeal against the SEC.
Oh, wow. So that's it.
Yeah, it sounds like it's finally over.
It seems like it.
And they basically agreed to finalize the settlement
Okay.
with the SEC keeping, I think it was $50 million.
Out of the original 125 million.
Right.
Gotcha.
And the SEC said they would ask the judge to lift the injunction that had been in place.
Okay. So that's a big win for Ripple.
Yeah, it removes a lot of uncertainty.
Right.
But what's interesting is that the report said XRP's price didn't really surge on this news.
Oh, that's surprising.
Yeah, it's kind of weird. You'd think that would be like a really bullish signal.
You would think.
But the analysts were saying that this outcome was already priced in.
So basically the market had already anticipated this happening.
Yeah, like it wasn't a surprise.
It makes sense. Yeah. But FX Street's technical analysis in this report said that there's a potential for XRP to move down towards 196.
Okay.
If certain support levels are broken.
Like what?
Like the 234 support level in the descending channel.
Gotcha.
But they also said that if it can break above the 50-day SMA and the 278 level, then it could move up towards 340.
Okay, so still some potential for both upside and downside.
Yeah, it's not clear which way it's going to go.
Yeah, those key price levels are going to be important to watch.
And they said that the RSI was neutral,
Okay.
that the awesome oscillator was indicating weakening bullish sentiment.
Interesting. So a bit of the mixed bag there.
Yeah.
Okay, so the SEC saga is over.
Well, it seems like it.
Yeah, hopefully.
And then we have Crypto.news reporting that XRP has actually overtaken Solana in terms of spot trading volume.
Oh, wow. That's a pretty big deal.
Yeah, it shows that there's a lot of interest in XRP right now. And they also said that the odds of a spot Ripple ETF approval in 2025 have increased significantly.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they said on prediction markets, there's now an 83% chance of approval.
Wow, that's a big jump.
Yeah, it's like people are really starting to believe that it's going to happen.
That makes sense. You know, especially after the SEC dropped its appeal.
Right.
It seems like the path is clear for an ETF.
Yeah, and Crypto.news mentioned that Ripple's CEO actually hinted that XRP ETFs could hit the U.S. market in the second half of 2025.
Wow.
And he said that there are at least 10 pending ETF applications.
So it's not just talk, there's actually action being taken.
Yeah, it's not just speculation anymore.
Right.
It's like it's actually happening.
Yeah, it's getting real.
So the ETF news is definitely positive.
Yeah, it's very bullish.
But then we have Coinfomania
Okay.
asking the question of why XRP hasn't had a more explosive rally yet.
Oh, yeah, that's a good question.
You know, it's been holding above $2, but it hasn't really gone on a crazy run.
Right, it's been relatively stable.
Yeah.
So what are they saying?
Well, they cited an analyst named Austin Hilton,
Okay.
who gave a couple of reasons.
Okay.
First, he said that there's just not a lot of strong market interest right now.
Okay.
Like a lot of investors are kind of sitting on the sidelines.
So they're waiting to see what happens.
Yeah, they're not ready to jump in just yet.
Makes sense.
He also said that it's the typical crypto slowdown season
Oh, yeah.
between May and July.
Right, things tend to slow down a bit during those months.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then he also mentioned those key resistance levels between 260 and 280 and the support levels around 224 to 230.
Right.
And he said that because there's not a lot of liquidity right now,
Okay.
it's hard for XRP to break through those levels.
So it's kind of stuck in a range.
Yeah, it's like it's bouncing between those levels.
Yeah, I can see that.
But Coinfomania also included the perspective of another analyst named Dom, and he said that the current price action above $2 could actually be a good thing.
Oh, how so?
He said that it could be building a solid foundation for future surge.
So he's saying that this period of stability could actually be a positive thing.
Yeah, like it's accumulating strength.
Right, it's like a coiled spring,
Yeah, exactly.
just waiting to be released.
And Coinformania said that XRP was trading at 247 at the time of their report,
Okay.
up 3% on the day.
So even though it hasn't had a massive rally, there's still been some upward movement.
Right. It's slowly but surely climbing higher.
Yeah.
So we've covered a lot of ground today.
We have.
We talked about that urgent call to accumulate XRP from Wall Street bulls.
Yeah.
We look at all those crazy price predictions.
From $8 to $77.
Yeah, it's a pretty wide range.
It is.
We talked about the market's somewhat muted reaction to the SEC news.
Right.
And how that might mean that it was already priced in. We discussed the potential impact of Trump's changing stance on crypto and those rumors of a massive deal.
Yeah, that would be a game changer.
Yeah.
If it's true.
Right.
Which is a big if.
Yeah.
But, we also talked about the growing anticipation around a spot XRP ETF.
Right. And how that seems to be driving a lot of positive sentiment.
Yeah.